You know how to use the chat, Mr. Rose?
No,
Oh, okay. Thanks.
I'll just talk.
And we are live on Facebook. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Jamaal Brown, aka Mr. Black 365, and we are here for another exciting and informational talk, sharing of information, dialogue, building, melding of the minds on the Gist of Freedom Radio. I have a special guest with us today. His name is Howard Rose. He is an entrepreneur, a book lover, and a wealth of information. Mr. Rose, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing well, thank you. This actually started out as a conversation, incidentally, about the Grange, which is the home for a while of Alexander Hamilton. Let me first tell you a little bit of what I do and where I am and how I do it. I'm talking to you from Teaneck, New Jersey, and why don't we show my credentials, which would be the business card.
All right.
I have a used bookstore called Briar Rose Books in Teaneck, New Jersey, and it has the hours on it, but that's no longer true. Since the pandemic, I've been closed since March 13th, and I haven't opened yet because I am cautious. At any rate, that's how it should be. I run a used bookstore. I'm there 6 days a week, not because I have to, but because I enjoy being there, and I've been enjoying it for about 20 years. The bookstore had a nice look to it. If we go to the second picture, which shows a car crashing into it, that was probably the luckiest day of my life. That car crashed into that store because apparently the woman was trying to make a U-turn, and as she faced the opposite side of the street, she gunned it while she was in reverse.
Wow.
Now, it was a nice day, and normally on a nice day, I have two lawn chairs right up against that window, and had I been sitting there, which I normally would and should be, she'd have cut my body in half.
Wow.
So again, I say it was a very lucky day. In the
Indeed.
next picture, you can see the store after it was fixed up and a boarding was put over it. Eventually, because it weakened the structure, and that's beautiful enameled uh, uh, covering on metal slabs of a frontage that's probably would have been about 80 years old, made in Patterson. It's unique. It's gone. As you'll see in a next page rather, the new facade that was put up after the accident. So it's tidy, it's clean, it's nice. It's not quite as nostalgic. In the next photograph, you'll see how that window now looks, which is since the pandemic, I put that sign up. Behind the masks, amid illness, tears, and death, there is hope and some joy. So stay strong. It was true when I put it up. It's true now. We've had Teaneck, New Jersey as an epicenter in Bergen County as an epicenter in New Jersey, and New Jersey as an epicenter for the virus in the United States, number two, right after New York at the beginning. So we've had our share of deaths and illness, but there's good things happening. And most of us, the people I know, I do know people who have passed away and others who are sick. Most of us still enjoy a semblance of joys in life, and we're waiting, we're hoping, and it'll come. Next picture is the interior of the store, and that's me behind the desk, and it's busy. There's a lot of stuff. There's one of the dilemmas of having a used bookstore is you generally have more books than you have shelf space, and it's a never-ending battle of getting stuff out of storage, trying to find space for it, selling what you do have, and seeking other stuff. And to me, the hunt for new books, I shouldn't say new books, additional books, because they're not new, they're used books. That's the joy is the hunt. And I find wonderful, wonderful material. That face that you see on the left side, made of metal, probably weighs about 45 pounds.
Wow.
It was heavy enough that it bent the nails, and I took it down and put it underneath the couch to get it out of the way. It's I can actually see from sitting at my busy desk a sliver of space so I can see the front door. And you can see the front door in the direct center of this image. So if I were looking at the window, at the door from my desk, that's basically the look that I see. In the next image, that's the sitting area. I'm sitting at my desk to take that picture, And in front of me is the desk, and in front of the desk is a little walking area to get by the desk. And in front of that's a small couch, chess set, and then a one-seater.
Let me ask, that chess set looks quite unique. Is there any
It's a
fantastic
Franklin
story
Mint
behind
set.
it?
It's the Egyptian set, and it has a glass cover on it, and it's a nice looking set. It's porcelain bases and metal tops, and it's quote unquote gold plated, which means they probably use about 75 cents worth of gold because you can spread gold so thin on any surface. But it's a beautiful looking set, and it's a nice set. That set is now in my home rather than the store, which
Okay.
makes a lot of sense. Uh, what's interesting, that round bookcase that you can see in the center is one of four. There's a round one that's large, and immediately to the side of it is another one that's not quite as thick. You have Mount Vernon, fat bookcase, thin bookcase. Well, there's two more bookcases on the other side of Mount Vernon that you don't see in this picture. And I actually bought three of them at one time, and a guy walks in my store and says, "Gee, I have a bookcase that goes exactly with those bookcases. I'll sell it to you." Lo and behold, of course, I bought it. Next picture. Well, there I am again. Over my left shoulder, so looking at the picture on the right side, those are audio tapes. A lot of us still remember what they are. I now don't have a machine in the store to play them, so their demise is soon, I guess. Next picture. Oh, I cheated on this one. This one's from my house, not from the bookstore. Let's go forward.
Mr. Rose, if I could ask you, if you had to take a guess, a gander, a guess, an estimation, approximation, how many books would you say are in your bookstore?
It's a frightening statement. I assume upstairs, which is a room about 25 by 50 feet, that there's about 20,000 books.
20,000 books?
Well, here's where it gets frightening. I have a basement that's not very tall in height, but I store in there approximately 80,000 books. And then I have at home about 6,000 books, no, 4,500 books on the internet, and about another 6,000 that I should have by now put on the internet, but
Let's go back to the books, pictures of the
I
book.
procrastinate. Leslie, you've been there. It's a huge
Yes.
amount of books.
And I wanted to ask you real quick about the statue. You mentioned that how heavy it is. Could you give us a little bit more? What is it a representation of? And how did you get your hands on it?
Yeah, no, and who knows? It's something I've picked up along the way, and it looks like the kind of images you often see on brownstones in Manhattan. This is obviously metal, not brownstone, but it's very similar. So they're usually Greek type of images that you see. Sometimes you get into ones that are weird, odd, and almost horrific, the horror sculpture, but that's not one of them. It's not what I thought of at one point in time is because the mouth is actually open, that if I could do it without ruining it, but it would scratch it, I thought I could probably open Coca-Cola bottles using
That's
the mouth.
funny. That is funny.
Anyway. Oh, there's a picture underneath
Oh.
that. Go back just one for a
All
second.
right. Yep.
There's a picture. That's a newspaper article. And it's about a guy from New Milford, which is one town up, who is lost in the Bermuda Triangle.
Wow.
And I have people coming into the store who say, "Is that you?" I say, first of all, too long ago. Second of all, if I were lost in the Bermuda Triangle, I wouldn't be running the bookstore.
Absolutely.
At any rate, I go to the next one.
And I had another question about the books.
Yeah.
How do you get your hands on these books? Estate sales, garage sales, donations?
You've hit everything. Yeah, I have people who walk in with books, people whose homes I go to, garage sales, telephone calls, stuff I find on the internet. It's a variety. Anywhere I see a good book, if it's reasonably priced for me, I'll pick it up if I like it. And I get esoteric books sometimes because I think you should have them. I keep telling people the best thing I can find right now is if someone had a shelf of books on spelunking, I'd buy them. Spelunking is caving. No one in 20 odd years that I've been doing this has ever asked for a book on spelunking, but I figure a good bookstore should have a shelf of books on spelunking among everything else.
I know a thing or two about stalactites and stalagmites and all those good things.
Well, I stay away from it. I took kids on a hiking trip where we went caving when I was a camp counselor, and it rained when we were inside
Oh, no.
compared to when we were outside. So water was trickling
Filled up with
down,
water,
we were
yeah.
deep down in a cave. I mean, you had to go on your belly at times. we were lucky it wasn't a downpour because I think we would not have been able to
That
come
would have
out.
been scary. That would have been
It
scary.
was scary. It would have been deadly. That's what it would have been. At any rate, this is just another picture of Howard Rose. And then if we go to the next one, this
Before
is
we go
my
to the next one, before the next one's to take a moment for station identification. We are here on the Gist of Freedom radio show, and we are with Mr. Howard Rose, the owner and proprietor of the Briar Rose Books, currently under. Well, it's not under quarantine, but the area is,
self-quarantine.
he's self quarantining, so he's not there. But soon as all this is over, he will be back there in the place that he loves, place that he calls home, I'm sure, there amongst his plethora of books. Again, I'm your host, Jamaal Brown, aka Mr. Black 365, founder and creator of the Black 365 calendar and a whole host of things at black365.com. And again, we're on the Gist of Freedom radio show. Tell us about this photo here and this
This is a
young
guy
man
named
sitting
Harold
next to you.
Metzler, who was a bookman extraordinaire. He did it the old school way. He would buy books from people, from libraries, from anywhere he could find them, and he would put out a catalog, which he mimeographed basically at home. And he would send it out to his clientele. He had a listing, I guess, of addresses, perhaps a couple of hundred, and he would generally sell out pretty quickly because he had great books, wonderful prices, and nice anecdotal statements regarding the books. And I learned a lot from him. He was, I would call him a very refined gentleman, gentleman in every sense of the way. Uh, he wrote several books about book collecting and book selling, and I have copies of those. And I just remember him well. So I look at him as sort of a mentor. And he was known to bookmen all over the place because, again, he traveled. He went from store to bookstore, and he knew his business. And he really focused on American Revolution and broadsides. Broadsides are sort of like thin paper posters that would be put up with information on them. And it was very prevalent in the 1700s through parts of the 1800s, superseded by other stuff at later dates. Books, we're up to books in the next one.
Yep.
This is where the conversation actually started. And this one on the Grange. The Grange was the home of Hamilton. He had it built approximately 1800. So he didn't live in it very long because he was killed in 1804. Now, it was built in Upper Manhattan, and I got to know this on a personal level in 1970. I was a student at City College, and this is on Convent Avenue, and you would get off the subway and walk several blocks west and then walk on Convent Avenue south till you hit the gates of CCNY, City College of New York. And lo and behold, there's this building, this old building next to a church and next to another building. It was really hemmed in. It certainly wasn't like that when it was brand new. When it was brand new, he had land, he had acreage around it. It was located elsewhere. It's been moved twice already. So this is the middle location when I knew it.
I heard that had some roots in Harlem. Is that true?
It's in Harlem.
Okay. Wow.
It's just below 145th Street and Convent, and now it's been moved a few blocks away. It was moved there because they had the land available next to a church. Where it was originally located a few blocks away, he planted in 1802 13 gum trees. My understanding is he liked gum trees because the leaves looked like they were star-shaped like the flag. At any rate, 13 honoring the colonies. They, of course, have died a long time ago, but the house has been renovated. This book by Eric Sloan and the renovation and a lot of information. I'll show you if you can see that.
Yep.
There we go.
Yep.
It's funny. I look at the image in my computer and it's always backwards. So that's
Right.
intriguing. At any rate, Sloan is an interesting character because he's a very noteworthy artist and author who does books on, or did books, I don't know if he's still alive, on Americana. And his artwork was so good that he was hired in World War II to do books on cloud formations for pilots in the Air Force. So a great artist. And he's just well known. I have an original painting by him somewhere. At any rate, this group of books, you can see there's lots of titles on Alexander Hamilton, all different authors throughout the ages. Even the one on the left, which is just a paperback, literally has great information because people are compiling stuff from all different periods. And I'm looking for that now. Here we go. Uh, so even on new books, you're going to get them where they have great pictures. And I'm taking this one as an example. You can see that. Do I need it closer or?
Let's see. There we go.
Okay. Um, I guess it's this one right here is another picture of the Grange. And the reason it was built up by near 145th Street is because that was really farmland. It was forest in between there and the city. The city 15 miles away was filthy, disease ridden. It had many plagues, yellow fever. Initially, in the lower part of Manhattan, people left and went as far away as Greenwich Village, 3 miles north, to get away from the yellow fever. It had sandy loam type of soil, and the water drainage was better than down in the city. So there was a little bit less disease. But where he was, he brought his family. He had several children. I think he might have had 6 children or something or other. At any rate, so that was his home away from there because it was a real trip to get into the city as a lawyer and as a businessman and everything else he did. That was a real trip to do 15 miles on horseback in each direction. I mean, it was almost an overnight trip to go round trip. Let's see, what's next? One of the books. We seem to have lost it.
Uh-oh. Let's see. Can you see it now?
I see a bunch of files here.
Uh-oh. Let's get back to it.
I can show them instead if that's easier.
Here we are.
Okay, let's start with this one. We can start, yeah. Interview in Weehawken. Weehawken is where the duel took place between Hamilton and Burr. That was on July 11th, 1804. On July 11th, 2004, my wife and I were in the same spot. They had a reenactment, and the two duelists were relatives of Hamilton and Burr.
Wow.
Hundreds and hundreds of people there. So again, that was in 2004 on the anniversary. Now you would think that someone like Hamilton should know better than dueling. 2 years earlier, his son Philip, who we'll get to a picture of sooner than later, was killed in a duel in the same place. Now, the reason Weehawken, which is opposite 42nd Street in Manhattan on the Jersey Shore, the reason that was used is because it was outlawed dueling in New York. Laws were changing over a period of time, and it was frowned upon, it was illegal, it was whatever, in varying degrees depending on where you were. But you would think he'd have learned his lesson. His son was killed there 2 years earlier in a duel. I guess effrontery was a terrible thing at that point in time, because that's what the principals involved in Burr and Hamilton were ticked off about. You insulted me, take it back. I won't take it back. What do you mean you won't take it back? I challenge you. And indeed, they did do a challenge. The next book, Bibliography of Aaron Burr. I mean, so much has been written about these people that on each of them, you're going to have bibliographies, books about the books about. And this lists dozens and dozens and dozens of books with anecdotal notes and information about it. It's a real help. One of the things that you learn as a book person or as a historian or as anyone just interested in a topic is the more you read, the more you find out you don't know, and the more you get resources to look for more information. So the best thing in a good book is not just the information it provides, but the fact that it has notes giving attributes as to where the information was garnered from, that it'll have a bibliography of other books where the person picked up more information. It will have date indexes, so you get things in a chronological sequence. The more information you get, the more you can research, the more you get to know. I've had a couple of other incidents involving Hamilton as well, not just walking by his home on Convent Avenue, but there's a statue of Hamilton on the heights in Weehawken that overlook the dueling area. They don't know the exact spot of it, but they know approximately. And there you go. I picked up a couple of links that I sent with this thing, with all these photographs, and the links have wonderful, wonderful sources of information. Now you have to realize there's a fence, and behind the fence is another fence, and behind that is a statue and a bust. My son is in his 40s. I was there with him when he was a young boy. And I decided I wanted to read this and yell it out to him so we would get all the information right then and there. So I climbed the fence which is exactly when a police car came by. Uh, I talked my way out of any kind of summons or anything like that, so I was pretty fortunate. But it's a beautiful area, and when you get to the duel, there's a lot of contention about who shot first, who shot second. Hamilton didn't aim at him. Both of these guys are scurrilous characters in a certain degree. They were both womanizers. Uh, the affairs of Hamilton were well known. Burr, let me backtrack and tell you, both men had a little bit of dissimilar and similar backgrounds. Hamilton came from a poor background in the Caribbean, came up, got his education in this area. On the other hand, Burr lived in the area. His father was not just a pastor, he was the president of Princeton College, wasn't a university yet. So he came from a very educated background. And when you compare the two, they each had their merits. Hamilton, finance and ideas, and he was just an amazing person. Burr was probably one of the best lawyers of his time around. I mean, they worked on cases together, as a matter of fact, before they
Really?
had, yeah, I think it was a murder case. At any rate, they were both well known. They were both highly regarded. Hamilton more had the ear of Washington during the war, but both were war heroes. And Hamilton, oddly enough, his real claim to fame, besides being an aide de camp to Washington, was he was in charge of artillery units. Where the hell do you pick up that kind of a skill?
The irony, huh?
When I was a kid, I used to shoot them off for these cannons. No, I don't know how he picked it up, but at any rate, he did well. When they had the duel, everything is so interrelated. It's amazing. After the duel, and I'll get to the duel in a second, Hamilton was ferried back or boated back to Manhattan. He was in the care of a Dr. Hosack. Dr. Hosack was one of the leading physicians of the time who also attended his son at his son's death after being shot. He had what was called the Elgin Gardens, where he grew medicine. The Elgin Gardens was, I guess, 1 or 2 acres or whatever. And it's a spot where we now have Rockefeller Center.
Wow.
So everything, again, like I say, is so interconnected.
Well, seeing these guys interconnected, am I correct in thinking that Hamilton and Burr established the first free high school in Brooklyn? I read that once upon a time.
Erasmus High School.
Erasmus, wow.
Yeah, I didn't know that until recently. I was surprised to learn that. I have books about Erasmus High School published in the 1890s. It goes way further back than that. You're right, to the late 1700s. The thing that they had also in similarity, the two men, they both had chronic loss. With Hamilton's son's death, who was his oldest child, one of his daughters just went stark raving mad. She was idiotic for most of her life after that, and oftentimes would just be seen talking and muttering to her dead brother. Once in a while she was lucid, but not that often. Burr, on the other hand, married Provost family, a woman, I forget her first name, and it's Schuyler family, Provost. At any rate, and he lived in New Jersey for a while with her and then came to New York. And his daughter Theodosia suffered a tragedy. She and her husband, newlywed relatively speaking, went on a sea voyage, never heard of again.
Wow.
So she was gone. Also, what's interesting is both of them in the American Revolution, very famous for their exploits. Washington used as an office, a headquarters, the Jamaal Mansion, which is by Edgecombe or Edgewood Avenue in Manhattan, around 160th Street, about 5 blocks east of the Hudson. It's one of the highest points in Manhattan. You have wonderful vistas to look at even now. And Madame Jamaal was a widow of one of the wealthiest men in the United States. And he did well with her money. He wasn't quite a gigolo, I think, but he certainly did not do her well. He did her wrong. There's a book about the Jamaal Mansion, which I looked for tonight, but I couldn't find. So even about buildings, the Grange, the Jamaal Mansion, books are written about these things. It's amazing how detailed and focused you can get into it. Here we see Hamilton from one of the books that I've shown in one of the other pictures. If we go to the other picture, you see Burr, the one above, yeah. And I have different books with different pictures of them, and they all look similar. You know, if you look at pictures of George Washington, you find that he looks so different in one picture compared to another, you'd say it's not the same person. If we go
Absolutely.
down, next picture is a woman, and that's Theodosia, his daughter who was lost at sea. And then one more down is Philip Hamilton, again, a duelist, not a good occupation for people. At
No.
least half the time you die. If we go down, another book is shown, one slide down.
I want to go back to Theodosia real fast.
Sure.
About how old or what year was it when
I
she?
think she was in her 20s,
Okay.
and I think they were relatively newly married, and they were going to go south to the husband's family, I think. Sometimes I get caught up between recollecting and making up and exaggerating. Pretty close.
How soon after Philip?
Well, Philip was 1702 when he was shot, 2 years before his father. So this probably happened a bit before that. I have a feeling it's in the 1790s.
Okay. Going back to images of Hamilton, I've once heard some speculation that he perhaps had some African blood in him. I've seen some pictures where his hair seemed to be a little bit more coarse or what have you. Is there any evidence of that in your research that he
Well,
had some
he-
African?
I'm trying to remember. I know he was a bastard, but his family was still very close. His mother and his father were very close, uh, and she was probably of mixed blood, and the father, I believe, was mainly of French blood. Recollection, not fact. So yeah, there's certainly that possibility. Uh, I'm trying to remember. I'm not sure if he's one of the quote unquote forefathers who did or did not have slaves. He may not have, but I'm not on sure ground with that.
Okay. Tell us
Uh,
about this book here.
uh, well, they were rivals. They literally, how much law cases of significance were there in New York City at that point in time? There was certainly enough to keep a couple of people busy, but it was a fierce competition between them, among others. And again, I think that they were rivals. And then they were rivals politically because they supported different policies. One supported Jackson, one did not. Uh, I'm sorry, not Jefferson. One did and one didn't. One liked the federal type of government, others wanted states' rights government, but they were both connivers. One for land grants. Aaron Burr was accused of being a treason after the death of Hamilton. He did speculation down south near the Florida area, and he basically, so it's said, wanted his own kingdom. Well, what the heck? If it's outside the United States and you claim the land and you own it and you buy it, I have a feeling that at that point in time, you probably could have done whatever you wanted. But in the Federalist period, people were so gung ho on quote the United States. I guess it's almost sinful to think of anything else. Hamilton, on the other hand, was a conniver in terms of the bank situation, the Manhattan Bank, which he helped found. And he did that not because he wanted a banking institution, but because within the charter, he got water rights to Lower Manhattan to feed water tubes into it to keep the place going. Water was a major commodity at that point in time because most water in Lower Manhattan was filth. It was swamp water. It was there were tanning factories in what was called the Old Swamp, which used to be a clear water, and people would go fishing there. So water was a horrible thing. It had to be piped in. So he got the rights for that and made money financially from the bank as well as from the water company. So that they both did all sorts of different things. If we go to the lower one, to me, this is the crowning book, the Federalist Papers. This is the book I mentioned before we started, and I'll repeat it now for the general statement. If you look at the date on the bottom, it is 17, that's the MDCC, that's 1700, L for 50, and then 3X's is for 80, and then the VIII, it looks like there's a fourth I, which for years now I've been wondering, was this printed in 79 or 78? Because there was a time where Roman numerals were pretty loosely done. We know traditionally that a 9 is an IX. It's 1 before 10. That's how you get 9. If you go to 11, it's X plus I. So it's 10 plus 1. That's the basis of the Roman numerals. So I thought this was where they were going V5 plus I for a 9. But it may be a misprint. It may just be a line that's half there, half not there that shouldn't be there at all. So I have to research it because this is only one of two volumes for this set. And if I had two volumes, this one's not in good condition. The cover is off, this, that, and the other. And this is, here we go. Let me take the plastic cover off so it's a better image.
And how did you get your hands on this book?
Cooperstown, New York. A wonderful book dealer had it. It was an odd volume. He didn't want it. I got it.
Did he know? Did he know what he had in his hands?
I was dealing with two different book deals, and I forget which one in Cooperstown. One of them was Butterfield, which was a wonderful, famous book dealer for that area back in the 1970s. And then another one is still there, and he moved to much larger quarters now within the town of Cooperstown. And his name shouldn't escape me. He's a wonderful book dealer and wonderful material that he has. At any rate, he worked for this guy Butterfield, and maybe his name will come back to me later on in Cooperstown. And at any rate, I just happened on it, and it's a great book. If we go back to the cover, the first page, title page of that book, you can see agreed upon by the Federal Convention. In 1787, they met, they decided, and they came out with information which was done by several people. It wasn't just him, and it was put out as it was written in pamphlets. And this is the basis, the Constitution of our government. It talks about how the Supreme Court should be structured, Congress, the houses of Congress. It had all the detail. It was an amazing document for its time, and it was a first. I mean, this was a first. It's not like they said, hey, let's take a look at this. We'll bend it a little bit and make it our own. It's like, wow, let's just come up with something wonderful. And they actually did. It's a thick book. It's a lot of material, and it's only it's a second of two volumes. So it's a tremendous amount of information.
Absolutely. Let me just.
Do you have the book?
Excuse me?
Can we look at the book again close up?
Sure. Now, it's not only a thick book, it's over 370 pages for this volume. And if you look,
those are some small.
That is
print.
small typeface. Yeah,
absolutely.
So it's just, I'm always amazed when you talk about the American Revolutionary War period and then thereafter immediately, because they talk about education was hard to get. A lot of people couldn't read or write, and they would listen around as Thomas Paine's words, were quoted, common sense. And I read it, parts of it, and I got caught up saying, what the heck is he talking about? This is not the easiest language. So to think of these farm boys sitting around a fire, listening to the rhetoric being read to them and understanding it, and they claim that they did, I'm quite amazed at it.
Absolutely. Let me just pause right there for a station identification. Once again, we are on the Gist of Freedom Radio station. This is your host, Jamaal Brown, aka Mr. Black 365. And we're speaking with Mr. Howard Rose, a book lover, book dealer, and I'm sure you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you've never met a book, never got your hands on a book that you didn't like.
No, I give you the opposite statement now. I once gave a lecture. I was a collector, not a book dealer, at Fairleigh Dickinson University, where I used to work. And it was just an evening thing for adults to come in for after school education, whatever, just a discussion on book collecting. And off the cuff, I made a statement then that I've repeated many, many times. People like first editions, the first time the book comes out. Later editions are less valuable. People like the first edition. It has a premium in terms of price. And my statement off the cuff that night was, every book has had a first edition. And there are many books that should not have had. And I still say that's a true statement. There's some real garbage out there. What a waste of paper, print, and everything. Let me show you a book that's not in the group right
All
now.
right.
This is a picture of Hamilton, and I'll read the title because I know it's hard in terms of using the computer to see it. This is called Alexander Hamilton, Nevis Weehawken, and it's a lecture on the military career of Alexander Hamilton with elaborate notes on the important events of his life and full particulars of the Hamilton-Burr duel. Although this is a second edition by a guy named Gray Bill, what's interesting, and I just picked this book up again in the stacks, forgot that I had it. What's interesting is the inscription, and I'll read that after I show it.
All right. Yep.
And you might be able to read that name on the top, Hamilton. The book is inscribed Mr. John C.L. Hamilton, with compliments of the author, yada yada, his name, 1907. Now, I don't know which Hamilton this is.
I was just
but
about to ask.
I haven't researched it, but considering the topic is Hamilton and it's written to a Hamilton inscription by the author, I've got to believe that this is the Hamilton that we're talking about.
Now, I can't help but ask you, in our listening audience, they have to have lived under a rock if they haven't seen or heard of the stage play Hamilton. I have to get your take on the play that's now on Netflix.
It's okay. You can embarrass me. I've never seen the play. I know a
you
lot of
and me
people-
both. We might be the only two people, in this continental United States who have not seen it.
I have an understanding that there's a lot of integrity to the information in the play. A lot of it's a bit of hype and exaggeration, poetic license. My readings on the topic are very large, and I knew from years ago that there was a hairpin trigger on the guns that were used. They were Hamilton's guns. I'm a little suspect as to whether or not Hamilton fired at him or not at him. They claim that he didn't try and hit Burr, but Burr in fact did try and hit him and got him.
Oh,
and
wow.
that's a deadly blow. When you have a hairpin trigger, I can imagine that literally if Burr fired first and Hamilton got hit, his arm would go up in the air, and even the slightest amount of pressure would cause the trigger to pull and to hit the branch that they claim was hit above Burr's head. They claim that he didn't try and hit him. You know what? There's letters saying that it's not an honorable thing to do in his hand, go to a duel. But again, his son died in a duel. He accepted the duel. There were books written about dueling and the etiquette. This is not a game. This is not a fun thing. And it was a matter of up to and including mortal honor situation.
We have a photo reenactment here.
Yeah. So I don't know. Again, when you have trick guns and you have personality clashes and you have anger, and it beats the heck out of me.
And do we know the conversations or what exactly led up to the duel? What happened right before? Do we know?
Yeah, one of the books I have here is that's one of the. At any rate, it's a copy of the information printed in 1804, which they interviewed all the people who were at the duel, because there were seconds, and there were the oarsmen and the boatmen and the this and that. They came by rowboat across the Hudson, again, because it was illegal in Manhattan, in New York City, to have the duel. It was the politicizing regarding the presidential election in part. And then again, a statement was made that was nasty by Hamilton regarding Burr. And Burr's recourse was, take that back. And he didn't say anything. He didn't take it back. And not taking it back was similar to saying, I acknowledge that what I said is correct and true, and I stand by it. And I think a couple of letters were written, and they had people carry the letters. It was done by messengers, close friends, and it went back and forth, and it wasn't attended to. And it got to a point where we said, well, then I challenge you. And I accept.
In the language of preschools or schoolyards across America, let's fight.
Yeah.
Let's fight.
Except they use guns. So it was a bad situation, difficult situation. And the mourning that was done and the attitude towards Burr, he was a hated man. Now you're talking about a guy he's vice presidential stuff. I mean, this is not like the low guy on the totem pole. Yeah, here we go. You just said the one that you had just before that one.
Yep.
As told in the original documents.
Yeah.
So it ruined the rest of Burr's life, and people say rightfully so. He was scorned. It's the type of situation where I guess it was if he went into a bar or a tavern, they would turn their backs on him, and it could be worse. I'm surprised that he wasn't accosted for a duel again.
I was just about to ask that. Was there any was there any legal recourse? Was was there any jail or again, did
I
anyone?
think he might have been acquitted of it. I know he was acquitted of treason for the land deal, uh, and I think charges or indictments or whatever were either acquitted or dropped or something or other. But he was not incarcerated because of this. I guess getting away with it in Weehawken.
Right, and again, you were sort of going down that road a second ago when Hamilton was a beloved man by many. No one sought to avenge his death.
Not to my knowledge. I don't know the answer to that.
He did go on the run.
Well,
He
he left the area, yes, but I don't know if because his life probably was threatened. I mean, I could certainly see it happening. He
he
lived
left the country.
he lived another 28 years
Oh wow!
with this label.
Wow.
He's considered the bad guy. It's funny. I don't know how bad a bad guy he was. Why would not? I mean, would Hamilton have been labeled a bad guy if he killed Burr? I don't know. I don't know what the personalities were perceived at that point in time. I guess Hamilton was probably the more socially endowed person with other people
Right.
compared to Burr, who probably was a little bit more stiff. I'll use that word.
Gotcha. Let me ask you this. Could you explain to us the importance or the value of these primary sources? Again, you talked about people who were there, the oarsmen and the boatsmen, and all these folks who were there. Could you tell us, particularly for our younger audience, the importance of having these again firsthand accounts and primary sources?
These are eyewitness accounts. You know, what happens is you get eyewitness accounts of people who write it down at the time, and that's the most important time to do it while it's fresh in your head. Often it's done during, uh, sometimes it's done immediately after, and sometimes it's recollections of an old person in their 80s who were writing about something that happened in their 30s or 20s. There's a lot of American Revolutionary War recollections that are done that way, and some really great work. But this was much more contemporary at the time, as it as indicated in this book, the original documents. The original documents are from 1804. Newspaper accounts were done. Now, newspaper accounts could be a week or two after the fact if it's down in Florida, for example. News did not travel all that quickly, and sometimes it got twisted by the time it got to its final destination. But at any rate, the best information is eyewitness accounts. I saw this happen. I heard two shots fired. I heard it shot 1 second after the first, and I saw Hamilton shoot first, or someone else. And actually, the reality is, oftentimes you have two witnesses. One says I saw Hamilton shoot first. Another one says I saw Burr shoot first. So how do you differentiate? I guess you take a vote. What the majority says. I don't know how detailed that is. Again, most of the material about Hamilton and Burr I read many years ago, so it's not quite fresh in my mind. But again, people have their recollections, and they were on site. The shore wasn't a big place on the west side of the Hudson River there. It was a sandy place where you could land a boat, where you had enough room for some trees to be there and for a flat surface to count your 10 paces, walk away from each other, turn around, shoot your brains out. I mean,
Shoot your brains out. I understand that the play was based on a Rob. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his last name. Chernow's book. Are you familiar with that author and his work?
no, not offhand. You have
Okay,
to realize there are dozens and dozens, perhaps a
dozens
lot more than that, books about it. Uh,
indeed.
it- Between having something to eat and setting up the computer tonight, I discovered a couple of more titles in my library.
Really?
And I was at my store a little earlier. I discovered another one, but it was an odd volume of a 2 volume set about Hamilton, so I didn't bring it in. But I must have 10 different books at least about Hamilton, maybe more, and about 5 or 6 about Burr. Uh, and I used to have some magazine articles. It was covered in a lot of detail and recurrently over the years. Like I say, the books that I have, some of them from the 1860s, some are from the 1960s. Uh, the newest one I have is probably the paperback one, which I'm guessing without looking is probably about 1990s or so. I don't know.
Wow.
Uh,
And I want to ask, are you an author? Have you written a book?
no, I write letters.
Gotcha.
I write letters to the newspaper, and they've been published. Uh, um, I, we live in a society where there's just so much inequity that you have to write and protest it. And it's my letters have been published that were, shall I say, uh, anti-Trump. Several of them. Our past governor in New Jersey, the train tracks that they have going through Teaneck with volatile oil in them, and when they wanted to put a dinosaur park in one of our wetlands, big, huge plastic dinosaurs, 30, 60 feet tall, and put a parking lot in the wetland. So those are the kind of things that I get concerned about. And my concern extends, so I'm involved in our community in Teaneck. I'm a trustee on the Board of Education. I'm on the planning board, and I make my voice known. And I guess the more I make it known, the more I'm going to probably be shut down later on in life.
Dare I say you are Hamilton-esque in terms of your objections and in speaking up?
Well, I like to write short letters to the point that are strong. I should have had a couple of them prepared for tonight, maybe, but I didn't know I'd go off on a tangent. But they're usually about a paragraph or two. I'll give you an example. The gist of it, no pun intended on names. At any rate, there was one about the healthcare initiatives that were coming out. And I said, on the one hand, we have Obamacare, and on the other hand, we have I don't care. And how can the Republicans say that they're here for the Americans when they don't want to give them the same benefits that they enjoy as representatives of our government with free health care? They won't even give it a cost to Americans. So, I said, and it just went on like that, but only a couple of lines, but right to the point of how can you, if you're going for a governmental position, how can you not care about such a large proportion of the American population? And those are the things that upset me. And I say I'm very lucky and fortunate that I'm at a point in my life where I can do and say and think what I want.
I was going to caution you now. We don't want anyone challenging you to a duel.
I actually have a non-working exact replica of a Wyatt Earp gun and Ulysses S. Grant gun, handguns. They are heavy, metal, real, and they look as if you took the pin out that blocks the barrel, they would work. I will never test it out.
Yeah, I was going to say, you haven't tested it in the backyard, not even once.
Not at all.
From what I understand,
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, from what I understand, Hamilton wrote a letter as a teen that landed on the desk of some Princeton educators. And like I say, it seems as if he had a lifetime of, dare I say, rabble rousing and stirring up the pot.
I don't doubt it. Look, when you have people who are innovative, familiar with engineering, with artillery, with statesmanship, with finance, with military directors, these are latter-day Renaissance people, in a sense. They're multifaceted. I look at people who multitask, and the statement I once made publicly was, I don't know how people multitask. I have difficulty monotasking. So I envy them.
We're coming, Howard, to the end of our show. Share with us any last words you have, whether it be of Hamilton, of your store, of the longing to return to your store. Again,
I will quickly.
Share with us.
I've had a number of students come to my class from lower grades from out of town because they were given an assignment to speak with someone like a book dealer or a bookstore and find out how it works, why it works, and learn about books. And the lecture I give them, in a sense, is about 2 years before the Mast by Richard Dana, written approximately 1840, 1841. And it talks about his voyage from New England around the Cape and up the west side of the Americas up towards the San Francisco area. And 2 years, I tell them, everything about this book is so detailed and so significant, even the title. 2 years before the Mast. Well, when you're brand new on board ship, you're given crappy quarters. You sleep before the mast. In other words, the forepart or the front part of the boat. Think of a boat, and you can look at it. If this is the back of the boat and this is the front, that's what's hitting the waves. That's what's going up and down 10, 20 feet at a time. In the back, it's calm. It pivots right there. It doesn't move very much. That's why the captain sleeps over here. He doesn't get the pounding. So he slept 2 years before the mast. That was the title of the book. And the title of the book was the example of what he experienced during his 2 years before the mast. And he talks about the quarters and about the activities and about the different places they land. And in the 1840s, San Francisco area and in California talks about being near a cliff, and the pelts that the Indians had gathered for in trade were thrown over the cliff just to land by the shore area so the boat could pick them up easier. They didn't have to transport them by mule or whatever on treacherous trails. And his adventures and the storms and this and that and the terminology he uses, which is a learning experience, are just amazing. And I tell these students that you have to understand that reading a book can give you enough imagery, enough information and knowledge that it was called being an armchair traveler.
Hmm.
You sit in an armchair, you read this book, and you can go anywhere, whether it's over the ocean, whether it's into outer space, the American West, the Arctic, the Antarctic. It's just amazing. Being an armchair traveler, you go places. So that's
Lovely.
about it.
Lovely. We truly appreciate it. I'm sure you have been the impetus, the starting point for many armchair travelers with the work that you've done for several years. We can't help but give our best energies and intentions and wishes so that we all have a speedy recovery from this pandemic, and that you can get back to what you love, and that being offering a launch pad for imagination for countless people. Mr. Rose, we truly appreciate you being here on the Gist of Freedom radio show, and we hope to have you back in the future so that you can share some more about those thousands and thousands of books that you have.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, this is Jamaal Brown, Mr. Black 365, host of Gist of Freedom Radio. We will see you back here next Thursday, same time. Talk to you soon.